Okay, so welcome everyone, and over to you, Peter.
Right, well, welcome to everyone to the sixth and final meeting of the All-Party Parliamentary Group for the East of England of 2020, which has been both a challenging and a very unusual year. I think we've done remarkably well to have 5/6 meetings, which have all, from my perspective, have all been extremely relevant and of interest to our region. I think this final meeting of the year there are three parts to the meeting. Firstly, just to review the spending review from an East of England perspective, taking into account our own submission. And then secondly, to report back from the discussion that myself, Daniel, and the rest of the team also had with others about how to up the voice of the East of England on a national stage. There's always that concern that we do hide our light under a bushel. And thirdly is just to map out the programme of meetings for 2021. And, you know, over the course of the next hour and a half, it will be very much great to get feedback from parliamentarians and other stakeholders and other attendees on what we've done and what we plan to do. And, you know, looking forward to, as I said, the next 60, 90 minutes. The first thing I have to do is to get formal agreement to the minutes of the meeting of the 4th November. That was our last meeting. I've been through them. I'm happy with those. Any objections or observations from anyone before I formally confirm that they are an accurate record of the meeting? Anyone showing any concerns, Steve, or not?
Not that I can see. And
Nope.
I should just say that after that meeting, we wrote a letter to the Minister, Kwasi Kwarteng. I did hear back from his office yesterday that a letter is in preparation, but it isn't ready just yet. I think, again, ministers have been rather overloaded with letters of late. But I'm sure we will get a reply from Kwasi Kwarteng at some point. And we'll circulate when we do.
Yeah, and certainly, so my feedback from Kwasi, I have a lot of correspondence with him. He is very proactive and he does engage. As far as, anyway, we move on to the main body of the meeting, and before I do that, just remind everyone of the Zoom protocol, which is to everyone to mute other than when they are speaking. And if you wish to speak or to ask a question, variety of ways of drawing attention. Firstly, you may wish to just put a note in the chat room, or secondly, waving either electronically or frantically in actual form. One way or another, we will pick everything up. So that's the introductions, and over to the first part of the meeting, which is the review of the spending review. And Steve from our Secretariat Devo Connect will just give us a brief overview and outline of the spending review in an East of England context. Steve, over to you.
Okay, well, I think the first thing to say is there were some specifics. Everybody's seen the paper, so I won't speak for very long, but just to highlight a few issues. Clearly, there was a commitment to money for Norwich, 95 million to Cambridge and Peterborough Combined Authority. I'm sure that was welcome there. And then I think some third river crossings, the Great Yarmouth one and the Lake Lothing third crossing in Suffolk, which I'm sure many people on the call will know a lot more about than I do. But those were actually specific things. Of course, the spending review doesn't go into utter detail, and this year obviously it was very broad brush and very much looking at the future and the recovery. So in that sense, specific things that would be relevant for the East of England is probably going to come out much more in the detail of subsequent announcements. Clearly the Levelling Up Fund, the £4 billion that was committed for sort of basically infrastructure, small infrastructure projects that can be delivered in the next, well, in the short term. That's obviously of interest, and actually seeing the detail about how that fund will be available, which communities, which MPs, etc. So there's a bit more there in terms of the detail to hear. But above and beyond that, there were obviously important announcements about R&D investment, which I'm sure people in the life sciences sector will be glad to have heard. We've obviously heard about the commitment to net zero. That figured very largely. Transport investment, digital connectivity, coastal communities, and obviously funding for local authorities, which of course I'll defer to Linda to speak about that. But I think the point is there are lots of things in the spending review that were of help to East of England. As you know, as per usual, it'll be about subsequent conversations about the detail in terms of what actually gets allocated, where and when.
Many, many thanks for that. And can I now pass on to Linda Hasey, who's the chair of the East of England LGA, to give the perspective from local government, and certainly from the work that I do with my councillor colleagues. There was a lot of representations going in ahead of the spending review, and with someone else, I described it as a goalless draw, the outcome. But Linda, I'm sure you will put flesh on those particular bones.
I think, Peter, that using the phrase goalless draw is in fact being a little kind. I think from a local government perspective, we're obviously very disappointed that we haven't got a 5-year review, which is really what we need is the stability of knowing what our financing can be and should be over the coming years. And again, it's just a rolling annual programme, which really doesn't get any of us very far. We are obviously, as local authorities, grateful to the government for plugging a number of the COVID gaps. But again, there is still, it's so frequently in the detail. And as you described earlier, you know, can indoor bowls take place? Well, again, it's that level of detail which actually then comes out several days later after some of these announcements are made, if not a couple of weeks later, which causes problems both for officers and for councillors. And I also suspect for MPs. So in terms, I think the other thing that came out, sort of sneaked out actually, was changes to the PWLB ability for councils to raise money. Now, if I speak very personally from where I am in East Herts, that has really affected one of the major regeneration schemes that we have on the books. And we have now had to go back to look at how we can do this major scheme, which we have been working on for a number of years, to actually how we can supply it to one of our major towns. So I think a number of organisations, again, the LEPs, for example, are having to go back and just look at the implications that you cannot use PWLB for revenue generating schemes. They can only be used for regeneration or other areas which cannot be classed as revenue income. So I think that's something that we will all have to look at going forward. Like Steve, though, I think there are a number of great things in the paper which are very much aligned to our aspirations in the East. The green climate, for example, you know, wind farms are very important in our area. Does this now, and changes in energy, we've got 2 nuclear plants within the region. Does this now give the go-ahead to the reconstruction of Sizewell? So in terms of other things, you know, the flexibility on opening shops, at least we know that that can go on till at least Christmas, but also we have to make sure that that can carry on after Christmas if we want people to come back to our high streets. And in our region, because we have no major conurbation, it does mean that actually a number of our small market towns and small towns have actually done really well because there are more people around during the day, but many of them are still now working from home. So if we can get them into the towns, perhaps late evening, early morning, then again, that's going to be good for the high street. But again, that has to be something that the shopkeepers want. You know, it's not just us saying you can do it. The restrictions on you opening are no longer there, but it has to be something that the high street retailers welcome. I think the other thing is, obviously, this paper has tried to put, for us, it's looking at the balance of small families, families who have suffered, and there were certainly some good things coming out of that, and that was one of the areas that we had pushed for. But I think it's like, as I said earlier on, it is going to see what's in the detail. How can we make sure that our area is not levelled down? It's important that the infrastructure does come into our area to make sure that our ports can work well, that our airports can work well, which are all key to the regeneration of the area. We have had some indications that there will be road schemes that will go ahead, but it has to be more than that. Expansion of broadband is key to the economic recovery of some of our rural areas. And if they say it's 95%, well, what about the other 5%, which are down the end of fields and in farms where it is very difficult for them to actually operate in some of these areas? So, curate's egg, perhaps not quite a goalless draw, but I think on the whole, we will just have to wait and see what some of the detail is. And I know that I will be working with officers to ensure that we get that detail and we make sure that the schemes are ready, shovel ready, etc., to make our bid to government. Thank you, Peter.
Many thanks for that, Linda. And keeping the football analogy going, let's just say this is the first leg, and we now move on to the second leg, which is the local government settlements, which will be coming out, I think, well, it's due to be this month. And I think just one point I would take out of what you said, and it's a feedback I get from not just from local government, but from those other third sector organisations in working with local government delivering services, wanting a little bit more. Annual settlements are of very limited value for planning long term, and actually delivering services efficiently as well. And that's a point I think we need to continue to make. Just one or two other things picked up. Steve mentioned the Lake Lothing crossing in Suffolk. That is very well known to me as it's in my constituency in Lowestoft. And what I would say on that very quickly, we're about to move from the planning stage into the construction phase next year. And two things very much focusing on coming out of that, making sure that large amount of money, and it's about £125 million invested in the middle of Lowestoft, garnering as much of that as possible during that construction phase for the benefit of local people and local businesses. And then secondly, we've said that one of the reasons it is being funded is that it's going to be a catalyst for inward investment. And when it comes to that, it's not just a question of sitting back, waiting for the bridge to be built and then seeing what happens. We've got to work straight away now to really make sure that it does deliver on that. And I think COVID has very much focused our minds on that. As far as Sizewell is concerned, I think as far as EDF is concerned, they view that as a positive step in the right direction, though they and an awful lot of others in the energy sector are awaiting the energy white paper, which will provide more information on government's energy strategy going forward so that they can plan investment with a bit more certainty. And obviously, you're right, in our area, large geographical area, relatively small towns and cities and market towns and villages, broadband is absolutely vital. So that's just a few comments from me. Anyone else got any observations, any thoughts? Welcome feedback from people.
Lord Hazelhurst has raised his hand.
Great. Alan.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I'd like to, well, there are many things one could take up, but digital connectivity. How many times, I ask myself, have we read news items that the government is going to put another 5 billion or X billion into the further rollout? And I'm sure this is all very commendable, I don't doubt it, but we still don't seem to get to the end of the road when everything is complete. Looking back, it does seem to me that it's questionable that the policy that was adopted from the start about leaving it to, in the main part, to BT, working with county council, so in Essex, super fast rollout sounded all right. But because there were areas that were accepted for specific contracts to private companies, seemed a good idea. But the experience in my particular part of Essex has been not very encouraging, in that a company called GigaClear came knocking on our doors in December 2015, and we are still waiting. Nothing has, well, a little bit has happened now, but it's taken that long. And then total uncertainty, it seems to me, between OpenReach and BT, because we found that some cabling was being done by OpenReach. And when questions were asked, even by parliamentarians of OpenReach, as to what was this for, was it just renewal or was it broadband, they denied it was for broadband. And it's gradually emerged that it is for broadband. So confusion reigns, and people are now saying, well, should we stick with the bespoke supplier, which is nearly there, or should we go to OpenReach, through which then you can have your choice of service provider? Why we can't get this sorted out, I do not know, and especially when extra money is being put in. And I think we just have to sort of find some method whereby these bespoke contract areas, there's got to be some stick behind them to make sure that they get on with it, not just have the contract and not then do sufficient to meet the needs of people.
Many thanks for that input. I think probably it's interesting from the other place, so to speak, you're still getting the complaints that we as constituency MPs receive on this particular issue, and the need for better liaison or dialogue and sort of coordination between BT and BT and OpenReach. I think that's a well-made point, and we may want to pursue that.
Yeah. Sorry, Peter, it's Linda again. May I just come in and expand that point, if I may? Because I think one of the other things that COVID has really shown us is that digital exclusion for either older people or younger people who are in families who cannot afford iPads or laptops has become very noticeable. And I think this is something that, again, it's showing up the divide in our communities between those who have and those who have not. It's a skills-based, it's a kit-based issue. If we're going to start looking at social care to a greater extent through digital input, how do we address that one? And again, I think it's a social care, NHS, local government, the third sector. We all need to work together to make sure that we are able to provide our residents with the skills and the kit so that they can become part of digital connectivity.
Yep. I think that's a point. What you're really highlighting is we talk about broadband so often in the business context. Actually, it transcends all aspects of living and support for our communities, particularly those who are vulnerable. And when it comes to skills, which is so absolutely vital to the to the future of our area. Any other comments from anyone? I'm just looking across. Anyone? Jonathan, I think I just saw Jonathan de Genoglia coming in.
Yeah,
Jonathan.
Thank you. All of that's really interesting. But I was just wondering, where are we generally with east-west connectivity in terms of transport? I mean, are we happy with the speed of the East-West Rail project, for instance? I know the A428 is also on my books, but just generally, where are we placed on transport?
On those particular projects, I don't have the answer myself. I don't know whether Steve may be a bit more up to speed on that, or whether there's anyone else on the call. From the context of the schemes in my neck of the woods, the Far East, if you like, and we particularly look at the A47, there is a serious concern as to the lack of speed from a Highways England perspective, and there have been a number of meetings brought together by Baroness Veer, who's the roads minister, and hopefully we will be moving forward into the next year in a faster gear than we have been over the last 2 to 3 years. But there is a general concern that these schemes are not happening quickly enough. That anyone, Steve, have you got anything perhaps to say on that specific point, or is anyone?
Well, just specifically on that, Jonathan. Basically, the point that we made in the submission to the spending review was very much around the fact that the East of England has a network of dynamic high growth corridors, I'm reading here, linking key regional clusters and institutions, Cambridge connected with significant coastal assets and global gateways, and Camcocks to the west. And I think that key point, and we also made a key point about the subnational transport bodies being more empowered, were basically not addressed in the general sense that we would have wanted them to be addressed in the spending review. But as indicated earlier, in terms of this football analogy, there are plenty of second legs coming up. And I think the transport statement and further detail we might expect from Grant Shapps, etc., is where we can pursue these. But I think there are some questions now about those, especially the East-West Rail. But somebody's put something in the chat, and maybe they want to actually say a bit more. I think it's Andy Walker.
Andy Walker from Suffolk Chamber of Commerce has put a comment that East-West Rail doesn't end at Cambridge and it needs to be extended to Ipswich and Norwich. And I would also add on to Lowestoft and Great Yarmouth as well. Good to have that comment, Andy. Anything more to say?
Thanks, Peter and Steve. Nothing else to add, really. I believe the consortium is a mix of councillors and local politicians in Norfolk and Suffolk. I think it's a case of they have to put together a business case and show the benefits before it can kind of be submitted. I'm not too sure how it works with the East-West Rail Company, but yeah, stakeholders are on the case, and hopefully it's something that the region can back, because it really would improve East-West connectivity rather than relying on roads, especially with climate change and things coming forward.
Any further comments, anyone? Alan wants to come back. Alan Hazelhurst.
Well, if I may, I mean, I have some bias on this subject because I'm chair of the West Anglia Task Force, but I don't deny the importance of East-West connections. Especially, I want to see improvement of the Ely Junction to deal with freight to and from the coast. I think that's a very important thing. But I think I just want to toss into the discussion the fact that we were told, I was told, when I became the Member of Parliament for Saffron Walden in 43 years ago that I had to understand that the great project was that traffic from the East Coast ports to the Midlands or the Northwest was to have two routes. One of them, once the Orwell Bridge was constructed, up the A12 and then along the renumbered A14, and then the A120 to junction 8 on the M11 and north from there. Well, the latter is still not complete. That's 43 years of what was seen as the absolute strategic priority for east-west travel. The other comment I'm goaded into making is that our problem, there's so much that we need to see done in the eastern region for different causes, all of them important in their way. But I think that's no good, because if the government is given too many different pleas and campaigns, it plays off one against the other. And in a sense, we have to have some degree of restraint on ourselves to decide what is the most important, get all of us behind it, and then we might actually make more progress than history shows we've made so far.
Alan, very many thanks for putting it in clear perspective. The unacceptable gestation period of these projects. Any other comments? Can I suggest that Steve, we may want to follow this up, and I welcome other people's views on this, with two letters. Firstly, a letter on digital connectivity to, I think, Matt Warman, who is the minister at DCMS responsible for broadband and digital connectivity, really highlighting the specific importance in the East of improved and first-class digital connectivity, not just from the perspective of business development and recovery, but also from education, social and helping and supporting the most vulnerable in society. That would be the first point, and I think the second letter we may look to write is to, I would suggest to Grant Chaps, emphasising the importance of east-west connectivity, both road and rail, for the eastern region. Does anyone have any views on that, in support or otherwise, or additional comments? Any thoughts? Steve?
I'm happy to prepare those,
yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, Peter. Yeah, I'm happy to prepare those, and obviously in the usual way come back to you and consult others on the way, but come back to you for sign off. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think I suspect Linda, Lord Hazelhurst, and Andy may have, and others may well have input that we want that you can encapsulate in those letters.
I think also, Peter, one thing is we need some clarity on what and how we can work with the new national bank.
Yes.
And what schemes are they likely to want to fund? How can we make sure that we benefit across the region and work with partners to actually use it if we're given the opportunity?
That's a point well made. Thanks, Linda, for that. That's appreciated. Any other comments? Can I then move on to the second item on the agenda, which is the report back on the discussions regarding strengthening our advocacy for the East of England. And we've got two speakers on this. Cheryl Davenport, Chief Executive of the East of England LGA, is going to provide some input, and Duncan Simons from IFM Investors will also highlight some issues as well. So, Cheryl, welcome. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. Just to report back, at our last discussion, Duncan and I met afterwards to decide some next steps to take this forward. I'm pleased to report that we've been able to arrange for a multi-agency meeting at 4 o'clock this afternoon on this matter. We've invited representatives from the LEPs, from the Innovation Corridor, the Tech Corridor, from ILGA, from the CBI, and from some of our growth boards. The meeting this afternoon is going to, and indeed Steve here from the APPG, I should have mentioned. We have put together an agenda for this meeting, and Duncan has done some pre-work to help us with what we might take forward. What we're aiming to do this afternoon is seek commitment from partners to jointly support the development of a campaign which would have a number of elements to it. It would have a media and PR element. It would potentially have a web portal element, and it would potentially have a number of other sort of tools and materials that we could use, including webinars. The idea would be that partners would develop that scope together, that we would then seek to procure jointly that campaign and those comms and other supporting activities, and that those materials could be used for two purposes. One would be for lobbying into central government politically around the key issues of our agenda here in the East. The other one would be around inward investment and seeking a good narrative about that across the region that everybody would benefit from, and that would then be more targeted to businesses and inward investment opportunities. So we feel we've got a good start here, and after the meeting at 4 o'clock today, we'll be able to feed back as to how all of that is going. Duncan has done some really helpful pre-work on that, and I'm sure he'll touch on that. So I will hand over to him, and then happy to answer any questions in this regard. Thanks very much.
Great, thanks, Cheryl. Just a reminder for those who haven't come across IFM and sort of why we got involved in this really. So we're a long-term pension-backed group of investors, and we've been investing in the UK since 2004. And our presence in the east of England is through Anglian Water and through Stansted Airport. It's really been over our engagement with that and with the APPG, working closely with Steve and others, that we've been sort of hearing this call really for more members to understand the wider benefits of the region, and that we should be not only celebrating clearly the strength of the region's diversity, but that also there's an opportunity, and a couple of references have already been made to it again today, that the importance of working together to give the region a voice to Westminster. So given our presence and our long-term commitment to the region, we've sort of leaned into this really. And following the commissioning of the Cambridge Econometrics report, which we did earlier this year, that was launched, if you recall, at the February meeting. We've had a series of follow-up conversations with a number of you on this call today, I know. And really that spurred us on to put forward this proposal that Cheryl's just made reference to. The proposal that we'll be talking about in its draft format at this afternoon's meeting is supported by Archant, who, as you may be aware, have a large coverage within the east of England around both regional and online media. And the proposal is that we get a cohort of businesses and local leaders and members from across the region, and use Archant as one of those vehicles to highlight to central government what support is required to develop the sectors going forward. We've tried to take on board, maybe going back to Lord Hazelhurst's point around making sure that we're not coming up with sort of competing arguments. So we've tried to come up with 3 broad themes for the campaign. There'll be one which will be around transport and trade. There'll be one around renewable energy, and then another one around science and technology. And as I say, as Cheryl pointed out, we'll be looking to finalise that scope over the coming weeks, and the key part of it will be this afternoon's meeting. The campaign has a timetable that ideally would run over a 3-ish month period, which would lead us into, or run into, the budget for next year. So that takes us right up to March next year. So really, for the purpose of the meeting, we just wanted to inform you about this, and obviously we will report back after this afternoon's meeting in terms of next steps. But clearly this is an opportunity for anybody who would like to get involved in this. Clearly a campaign like this is going to require content and contributions in terms of op-eds and stories and examples and case studies. So again, please reach out to us if you'd like to get involved with that.
Duncan and Cheryl, many thanks for that summary and those proposals. Looking at the chat box, I see that Simon Gray, we've had quite a lot of people coming in. Simon Gray is come in twice. Simon's from EAGA, that's East of England Energy Group, highlighting the key role we have to play, our region has to play in the energy sector going forward, and that was one of the 3 themes that Duncan picked up. And Simon has also said he's obviously keen to be involved in the working up that energy element going forward. And then Andy Walker from Suffolk Chamber has indicated their support, and I think he's also speaking for the other chambers across the region in Norfolk, Essex and Cambridgeshire, that I anticipate they will be delighted to have an input as well. So any other comments from anyone or questions? I see Steve has come in and has made reference to the minute letter we're to Minister Kwasi Kwarteng, on which we're awaiting a reply on that. And Anne Lim has her hand up. Anne, over to you.
Peter, thank you. Just 2 very quick points. First of all, Cheryl and Duncan, we are involved in this, and so I simply wanted to say thank you and give our huge support to what you're doing. I think it's so important to have not just the East of England voice, but the connectivity that you've stressed with those so many other corridors, not least the link to London or the Oxford-Cambridge arc and the Norwich Cambridge-Norwich tech corridor as well. And then secondly, we mentioned the R&D money on the comprehensive spending review. One of the uniquenesses of the one of the many of the East of England area is that life sciences corridor that actually runs from London, obviously up through Cambridge and Peterborough, and then beyond to Norwich and from Cambridge to Norwich. Inadvertently, without a message, earlier on in the chat, I put a document about the Innovation Corridors proposition for the contribution we can make as to the government's agenda being a scientific superpower, which is connected up with that R&D thing. So I just wanted to expand. When I say inadvertently, I did want to share that with people, but I hadn't realized when I posted it, it kind of did go through. So this is the explanation for it, and it might help in that broader context that we do have in the East of England, globally recognized important life sciences corridor that can do everything from the R&D to the manufacture, to the startup, to the spin out, so highlighted by COVID. And that's got to be in your 3 themes, the science and technology theme, that's got to be really one of the things that we're all passionate about. Sorry, Peter, thank you for indulging me, but I wanted to really support what's being done.
You have raised a very, very important point as to the a particular USP strength of the region that we do need to promote and highlight, and I think that was very appropriate and quite rightly said. Further comments, anyone? Can I then take it that we will, Cheryl and Duncan, along with Steve and his team at Devo Connect and others, obviously representing those specific strengths, the energy sector, whether that's from Simon, and on the R&D and the life sciences with Anne having her input, and indeed with the chambers and anyone else, we move forward this particular strategy of really raising our profile and getting our voice heard in Westminster. Is everyone happy with that? Right, we'll go ahead on that basis, and very many thanks to Cheryl and Duncan for leading on that particular point. That was really appreciated. Right, we're a little bit ahead of time, but that's no bad thing. We now move on to the third item on the agenda, the third leg, which is discussing the themes for next year's meetings. And Steve has prepared a paper on this, and I'll leave him to talk it through. Steve.
Thanks, Peter. Yeah. Well, again, everybody's got the paper and has seen it. Just to explain a couple of things. I mean, the first thing is we had in terms of what happened this year, I think there's been a very constructive process, as well as good attendance and great input from speakers and attendees. We've also seen outputs from meetings, including a number of letters to various secretaries of state and ministers. And I think it's been a very good process. And of course, we did get Steve Barclay centre stage at one of the meetings, and that was also very helpful. What we weren't able to do was to have our annual reception this year, which the APPG has done in conjunction with the East of England LGA. And as you'll see later, that is now scheduled for the middle of next year, when, let's hope, we will actually be able to assemble in person, actually in Parliament. Just on that, I should just say that when we consulted some of the leading stakeholders and sponsors about the future programme, one of the points that people did make was that even after the vaccine has been rolled out, it might be an idea to have alternate meetings by Zoom. We've kind of got used to this, and they are very good for being inclusive. Actually, MPs generally quite like it, in my experience. Peter, you might have a view about that. But it allows people to dip in and out, and obviously it saves a huge amount of time travelling and, dare I say it, carbon as well. So I think that's one of the propositions. We can work that out, detail of that out as we go. But I think, you know, obviously people do like to meet in person, and there are benefits of that, but also maybe every other meeting, once normality returns, could be by Zoom or similar. So in terms of the proposed sessions, what emerged from the discussions were effectively two themes, and I won't go into every detail because it's there, but basically people wanted to have a kind of an output. And so the idea of having an inquiry, taking evidence, compiling a short report. And the first one would be about the green recovery in the East, both the challenges and opportunities, with specifically drilling down into some of the detail on some of the things that people have been mentioning. Green travel, where we could pick up some of this stuff about East-West and the corridors. We can certainly pick up the digital points that people were making earlier as well. And obviously, the green recovery is vitally important and very, well, timely, not least because of COP26. So the idea is 3 sessions, a short report that will be launched at this reception in June. But also, I think we also recognise that there is this levelling up agenda, and parts of the region particularly are concerned about not being left behind. There is still that anxiety. There are issues that, dare I say it, almost kind of slip off our agenda sometimes. So we wanted to make sure coastal communities were going to be focused on, regeneration, tourism, and also trade, of course, because that is actually where all the ports are as well. So we thought a session on that would be very sensible, and also actually about agriculture and rural areas. Again, those are kind of get less attention. And obviously, finally, and of course, there's questions here about what order we do all these sessions in. But the third part of the levelling up one would also be about health inequalities and taking stock of where we are in terms of health and social care. And if you recall, we had a very good meeting about the fact that health and social care are moving more together, and obviously that's a concern and a key issue, and likely to be so, more so next year, because the government is planning to take forward a project about integrating care at local levels. So that's the plan. I'll stop there, Peter, and anybody's got questions, I'm happy to answer.
Steve, many thanks for taking us through that and summarising and setting out those proposals. And you did touch upon Simon Gray's comment in the chat box that whilst we're looking at very much from the east of England, what we're doing fits very well into the global agenda of COP26. And I think that's, we have a very important role to play in that. Can I look for any comments from anyone on those proposals? From my perspective,
Simon, I think.
Yes, Steve.
No, Simon's trying to come in.
Simon, sorry, my apologies.
It's just a very quick update. Just in terms of COP26, yeah, this region plays an incredibly big role. I don't think nationally it's recognised how big a role we're playing. So some of the region of 45 to 50% of the entire installed capacity of offshore wind in the UK is off the coast of Norfolk, Suffolk and Essex now. Add on to that Sizewell C potential. Add on to that, which you may have seen recently, the Oil and Gas Authority announced a major study into the Bacton gas terminal in North Norfolk. All of that together means that our region is the producer of energy for the nation. Without us, without the east of England, the lights would go off and the heating would go off across London, the South East, the Midlands. And government doesn't seem to fully appreciate that. So I think it's really important that we up our game leading up to COP26, because we are major stakeholders in this. That was what I wanted to say, really, Peter. Thanks.
So, and I think you've made that point forcefully. There is a concern that when people think about energy, they think about renewables, and they talk about carbon capture and storage. You automatically think north, if you like, to the industrial heartlands where there is derelict industrial land there for regeneration purposes. And we don't necessarily have as much of that land, but what we do have is an enormous existing infrastructure there on the ground that is being used to power the UK and will be used more to power the UK going forward. And I think that is something, a particular thing where we need, as advocates to the east of England, to make sure that isn't forgotten in Whitehall and Westminster. I was half thinking Simon was promoting a sort of East of England sort of independence campaign as he went there, but it was it's a point well made. And I think when it comes to the levelling up, again, it's important that we're not forgotten. I represent a coastal community, and coastal communities all around the East Anglian coast do have challenges that mean that we do need to be fully involved in the levelling up agenda. Government assure us that is very much still on. Coastal communities are on the agenda, on their radar, but we need to make sure that isn't forgotten. And I think also when you look at for search that organisations like the Suffolk Community Foundation have carried out into hidden needs and hidden deprivation, there is a perception that ours is a wealthy region, but that does mask there are pockets of deprivation quite often in places you wouldn't expect to find them. And that's something that I think we do need to have in mind going forward. Further observations and questions, anyone? I see Oliver, Olivia tells me that Charlotte Horrobin, she wants to come in. Charlotte, sorry I didn't pick you up. Over to you.
No, good morning, everybody. And forgive me, I've got to depart at 11 o'clock, but I'm the Region Director across the Midlands and the East of England for Make UK, so we represent UK manufacturers of all shapes and sizes. And we've been discussing the green agenda for a number of years, and it's been interesting to watch it evolve from a conversation talking about the price of kilowatt hours through to today what's quite a sophisticated discussion. And I think you're quite right to identify that we don't just hang our hat on the obvious choices, and we do see that it tends to be bigger businesses all thinking about particular locations in the country. And actually I think we've got to make sure that we see that there's a great awareness of net zero across the manufacturing community. However, if you look at these smaller businesses, they struggle to take action. So only 1 in 10 larger businesses are struggling to know where to take action versus the supply chain. And we mustn't forget that we've got these smaller supply chains all across the east of England that not only need help becoming more efficient, they need help to make sure that we get the total UK value from some of the contracts that are available, but also we need to go a step further and help them to revolutionise their business to make sure that they're embracing new ways of doing business. And I do absolutely agree, it's a great opportunity for the east of England. We've also just published some recent research. 42% of manufacturers are not content with the levelling up agenda at the moment. And actually they don't want to see big grand infrastructure plans. They want to talk about digital connectivity. They want to talk about local connectivity and making sure that we can upskill and bring some great roles into the region. Thank you.
Charlotte, many thanks for those, just highlighting those particular themes which are incredibly important. You've reinforced, I think, the need for improved digital connectivity. And also, ours is a region with an awful lot of SMEs who we do need to take along with us as well. And you've highlighted that, and that's really appreciated, and thank you for that. Further comments, anyone? I'll just quickly scan across to see if I've missed anyone. I can't see anyone else, so can I suggest that we proceed on that basis for for our agenda for next year, themed meetings around those 2 inquiries, and I think that they're sufficiently flexibly drawn that both the levelling up and the green agenda can encapsulate a number of the issues that we've talked about, such as digital connectivity. So, let's move that forward, and special thanks to Steve and his team at Devo Connect for working up that work programme for 2021. That brings us on to the conclusions and any other business. Can I ask anyone if there's any other business, any other issues that people would like to raise and really highlight as being of importance in the east of England? Anything that we may not have spoken about today that you think we should be raising? Any questions, anyone? I will just quickly look across the top of the screen. It doesn't look as if anyone else wants to say anything, which means we are finishing early, which in many respects isn't necessarily a bad thing. But can I thank all our speakers today, and also all our speakers during the previous 5 meetings during the year, all of you for attending. That's both parliamentarians and also those right across the east of England, also to our sponsors, and also to the Secretariat, Steve and his team at Devo Connect, for all that they do to support the APPG. We've got a lot of work to do, but I sense we're on the right road to really, impressing in Westminster, the importance of the east of England. And I'm not belittling that challenge, but I think we've got a clear